So you want to learn how to start writing your novel without wasting your time and fluffy writing advice. That's awesome, because in this video, I'm taking you through the only 10 steps required in order for you to get started on the right track. Let's go. Step 1. Brain dump your ideas. That's right. All you need to do first is to pick up a piece of paper and dump all your ideas from your mind onto the paper without worrying about organizing them. Your mind is for having ideas, not for storing them. Once you empty your mind, that's when you'll notice your brain power kicking in and you will be able to figure out how to use those ideas to the best creative potential possible. Step 2. Answer 3 questions. Well, there are a lot of questions that you'll be answering further ahead in the process, but right now, these 3 are the most important questions you should be focusing on. Who is this book about? What happens in this book? Why are you writing this book? So basically, that is your characters, your plot, and your motivation. And wait, the best part is you don't need to come up with answers immediately right now. Nope, not at all. Just write down these questions on a clean page so we can refer to them in the next steps. Now look at the brain dump page and your questions page and see if any of the ideas from the brain dump page vaguely fit under any of these categories, the 3 questions that you wrote. If something fits, put it down there in a bullet point format. Again, you don't need solid concrete answers. You just need the vague ideas to be dumped under the 3 questions, the 3 categories. What do you think is going to fit where? Nothing needs to be perfect right now, but just do this and we'll come back to it later. Step 3. Choose your theme. This is simply the answer to the 3rd question that you wrote down. Why are you writing this book? The reason we are answering this question first is because it's the most important one. Your motivation to be writing this book is going to be the driving force for you to keep going in the writing process. Also, your motivation for writing this book is going to become the primary theme of this novel. That is because if you believe strongly in something, only then will you be able to convince the reader to believe in the same thing as you do, which is all about world building and creating experiences. That's why if you pick a theme that you personally believe in, it will be the foundation of a compelling narrative and also your own driving force to keep going. So ask yourself, what do you believe in so passionately that you want the entire world to believe in it as well? What is the lesson that you would want your character to learn through the course of time? Write that down. Even if you don't have an amazing, solid, concrete idea, write down the vague idea that comes to your mind. Step 4. Choose your focus emotions. Most newbie writers tend to make this mistake of focusing too much on how their characters are feeling through a specific scene. What's more important is how you would like your readers to be feeling when they're reading a specific scene. Hence, I suggest picking 3 to 5 primary emotions for your entire book. What are the main emotions that you would want your book to be evoking in the reader? These are words that you would want your reader to use when describing your book to their friends. Have you heard readers say, "Oh, that book is so heartbreaking, it touched my soul"? Or people saying, "This was so light-hearted and funny, it just instantly made me happy"? That is the kind of effect you would want your book to have on your readers. For that, you need to know what are the emotions that you're trying to build using this book. So zoom out and look at the big picture arc of the story, even if you don't know what's going to happen at what stage. Still, look at the overall perspective, look at all the ideas that you have on your brain dump page and think, what are the emotions that I am thinking of evoking from this book? While you're doing this, a bonus tip would be to focus on narrowed, niche down emotions. For example, instead of saying, "I want my reader to feel happy," say, "I want them to feel warm and comforted." Instead of saying, "I want my reader to feel sad," maybe say, "I want them to feel nostalgic." Pick a niche emotion and not something very broad. That way, you will have a greater control over the story and you won't be lost because you can always refer back to this list of emotions and ensure that this is what your book is evoking. As you go further along in the process, you can do the same thing for each specific scene or each chapter. But for now, picking the 3 to 5 primary emotions for the entire book is just enough to get you started. At this point of the video, if you're getting any value out of it, please like the video, that really helps, and consider subscribing because I talk all about writing compelling novels and creating rich experiences for the readers. With that out of the way, let's move on to step 5, that is contemplate on your ending. The reason I say contemplate is because you don't need to know exactly how your book is going to end before you've started writing it. But having a vague idea of where the story is going to help you a lot during the writing process. That's why I suggest picking up a third piece of paper and writing down all the possible ideas of how you can end this book. There can be infinite endings for stories in this world, but I want you to think of as many ideas, as many endings as possible for this book that you're writing. Look at the page where you dumped all your ideas in the beginning. If any of those ideas fit under this category, put it there. If none of those ideas fit there, then just look at the kind of story that you'll be formulating on the brain dump page, and then try to guess all the endings that your reader will be able to guess when they just think about this plot. Once you have all these endings written down on the piece of paper, that's when I want you to narrow it down to 3 possible endings. One trick I use is the A to B formula. Look at where your characters are when the story begins. In the beginning stage, where are your characters? What seems like the most reasonable end, keeping the theme in mind? What is it that you would want your characters to have learned by the end of the story? If they have learned this lesson, how does that reflect in the ending? If they have not learned this lesson, then how does that reflect in the ending? Keeping these questions in mind, pick out those 3 possible endings. Once you have them, keep them safely, because you may need to come back, change them, alter them, do all of that during the writing process. But at least you know you have these 3 possible ways you can shift the story in. Moving on to step 6, choose your perspective. Now that you have an idea of how the story might shape itself, it is time to decide who will be narrating the story. This is very important because choosing your perspective is going to later decide what information you can reveal to the reader at what stage. So ask yourself, whose perspective will the readers be reading the story from? This could be one of the characters, your protagonist, or a third-person narrator who's not the part of the story at all. The reason I'm asking you to choose a narrator before you start writing a story is because if you pick a random narrator and then you reach halfway point of the story and you decide you want to reveal some information which this narrator does not have access to, then you'll just have to come back, rewrite, change stuff, and that's basically rewriting the whole book, which is not a fun process. Trust me on that one. Hence, I urge you to be super intentional when deciding your perspective and your narrator for this story even before you start writing it. Now there are different types of perspectives available out there. First person, second person, third person, omniscient, close. Too many for you to get confused and overwhelmed. I understand, but there are just too many to explain in one video. So if you want a dedicated video just for perspectives, then comment down the phrase, "I want that POV video." Next up is choosing your English tense. This is the simplest one on the list, and also the only one related to language that you need to decide before you start writing your story. I'm a professional editor, and being in this business, I've seen so many authors break their banks because they didn't know which tense to use while they were writing their story. So they just kept going back and forth between present tense and past tense, and then the editor had to fix it all. So the editor is going to charge so much money because fixing the tense is almost equivalent to rewriting the book. That's why I suggest picking your English tense before you start writing the story. I'm talking about choosing between past tense and present tense. Is it going to be Maria is going to the temple or Maria was going to the temple? Both of them are acceptable in the industry, but you need to pick one and stay consistent with it throughout the story. If you keep going back and forth between present tense and past tense, that is only going to confuse your reader, because language is something that we read by convention. It is ingrained in our ability. We learn reading that way. So that is why you need to pick one tense and stay consistent throughout the story in order for your reader to have a more immersive experience with your book. Next thing you have to do is to choose your time and location. Again, 2 simple questions. When is this happening? Where is this happening? If your story is happening in a fantastical world, now is the time to decide. The reason I ask you to establish your time and location before you start writing is because these 2 things are going to keep you grounded in the story. Every time you feel that you need a detail, you will be able to refer to the right information and hence prevent writer's block. This way, you will be able to figure out the answer to every logical question that arises in the middle of the story, and you won't need to stop and think or go and research at that point. Which brings us to the next step, which is block your time for research. I would like you to do your research before you start writing your book, because as we talked about, it helps prevent writer's block. However, I also know that it's quite tricky because it's very easy to go down the procrastination rabbit hole while you're researching for the book. Hence, I suggest you must block out a limited amount of allotted time for research before starting to write. For example, say, I'll block out 2 weeks of my time to research as much as I can about the specific time period and location, and then I'll stop researching and start writing no matter what. Now, this limited amount of time is going to vary depending upon the kind of book that you're writing. If you're writing a historical fiction, you'll need more time to research. If you're writing something in the present landscape in the same city that you live in, you'll need less time to research. So you need to figure out the right balance, but definitely have allotted limited time for researching before you start writing because you don't want to procrastinate. Also, if you're someone who's writing a fantastical story, then this is the time to do some world building. Again, allotted time because you don't want to procrastinate. Now that you have done all of that, it is time for you to do the final step, which is choose the right story structure. I know you're probably afraid of the word story structure, but trust me, it's not as scary as it sounds. You don't need to have big outlines or details or huge concrete story structures in place in order to get started. You don't. In my process, all you need to do in this step is to go back to the 2 questions we talked about in the beginning of this video. Who is the story about? What happens in this book? Now try formulating an answer for these 2 questions, keeping in mind the theme, the emotions, the possible endings, the time, the location, the tense, the perspective, all of those things. Now try formulating the answer to these 2 questions. Your answer can be as detailed as you want it to be. It could be 1 page, 2 pages, 20 pages, 1 bullet point list. It could be just the way that you want it to be. You may still not have the exact idea, exact details of what happens at every scene, but you will still have some plot points in your mind. You will be able to see what happens, when it happens, and at which order these events happen to the characters, and how the characters change over the course of time. Once you have those 3 questions answered in front of you, keep it there while you're writing so you can refer back to it and make sure that you're on the right track. You can of course make changes as you go ahead in the story and have fun while writing it because that's most important. Now at this point, you can take the help of 3-act story structure, hero's journey structure, or any other structure that you would like. But I also know that a lot of people find those structures to be overwhelming. That's why I would highly recommend this super simple and super effective method, which is called the ABDCE structure, which is perfect for beginners. Check it out here in this video where I'm explaining the ABDCE structure along with the story example that I wrote. Alright, that is me, Srishti Rathour, signing off for this video. Thank you for watching and I'll see you again in this video right here. Bye!